All right, so today we're diving into something that might feel like a biology class flashback, the classification of life on Earth. You know, how we organize all those incredible creatures into neat little categories.
Hmm.
You specifically asked for a deep dive that makes you feel like you're back in school, learning from a passionate biology teacher. So let's see if we can make that happen.
I'm excited to be your teacher for this deep dive. It's
Mhm.
a topic that always sparks curiosity. Get ready, because there's a lot more to this than just memorizing names.
Okay, so picture this. We're back in high school biology, and the teacher asks, how do we classify living things? I bet most of us would jump in with a classic plants and animals answer, right?
Hmm.
Seems so obvious. Animals move, eat, and explore, while plants stay put and soak up the sun.
Right.
Makes sense.
You're absolutely right. That's the intuitive approach humans have taken for centuries, going all the way back to Aristotle. He divided life into those two kingdoms, Plantae and Animalia. But nature loves to throw curveballs, doesn't it?
Right, because there are all these organisms that don't fit neatly into those boxes. What about those creatures that blur the lines between plants and animals, like sponges and corals? They're
Hmm.
stuck in one place, like plants. But they definitely aren't making their own food through photosynthesis. Did those kinds of examples shake things up in the scientific world?
They did. Those exceptions you mentioned were actually crucial in pushing scientists to refine their understanding. It's a great example of how science isn't about having all the answers. It's about constantly questioning and revising our models as we learn more. The fact that some organisms didn't fit the plant-animal dichotomy highlighted the need for a more nuanced system.
And then enter the microscope. Suddenly, scientists had a whole new world of tiny creatures to contend with, right? It's like suddenly realizing there's a bustling city under your feet that you never knew existed.
Precisely. The invention of the microscope in the 17th century was a game changer. It revealed the fascinating world of microorganisms, and these tiny life forms didn't play by the old rules. Some moved and ate like animals, others photosynthesized like plants, and some did a bit of both. It was a classification conundrum.
So what did scientists do? Did they try to cram these microorganisms into the existing plant and animal kingdoms?
Thankfully, no. They realized they needed to expand the system. That's when Ernst Haeckel, a German biologist, proposed a third kingdom in 1866, Protista. It became the home for all these microorganisms that didn't fit the traditional molds, like amoebas, algae, and slime molds. Think of it as the miscellaneous drawer for eukaryotic organisms that don't fit neatly into the plant, animal, or fungi kingdoms.
Okay, so we're up to three kingdoms: plants, animals, and now protists. I'm starting to see a pattern here. As we learn more about life, we realize we need more categories to capture all the incredible diversity. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning, right?
You're catching on quickly. This is where things get really fascinating. You see, the discovery of microorganisms was just the tip of the iceberg. As scientists delved deeper into the microscopic world, they uncovered even more surprises that would lead to further revisions of the classification system. For example, let's talk about fungi. For a long time, they were grouped with plants, but there's a key difference that set them apart.
I remember learning that fungi don't photosynthesize. They get their nutrients in a completely different way, right? So no sunshine and chlorophyll for these guys.
Exactly. Fungi absorb nutrients from their surroundings, a process that makes them more like decomposers than producers. Think mushrooms, molds, yeasts. They're all part of this unique kingdom that plays a vital role in ecosystems by breaking down organic matter. This realization that fungi were fundamentally different from plants led to their separation into their own kingdom, fungi.
Okay, that makes sense. So now we have plants, animals, protists, and fungi. It seems like every time scientists peek under the microscope or venture into a new environment, they discover something that challenges our existing categories. It makes you wonder how many more kingdoms are out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's the beauty of science. There's always more to learn, and our understanding is constantly evolving. We're going to dive into some even more surprising discoveries, like the world of bacteria, which will bring us to a total of 6 kingdoms and introduce the concept of domains, a whole new level of classification.
All right, so we've journeyed from Aristotle's two kingdoms to a world with protists and fungi. Where do bacteria fit into all of this? They always seem like the rebels of the microscopic world, thriving in all sorts of extreme environments.
They certainly are. Bacteria are like the ultimate survivors, adapting to some of the harshest conditions imaginable. And you're right, their discovery added another layer of complexity to our understanding of life. Before we jump into domains, let's explore what makes bacteria so unique.
Well, I remember learning that bacteria have a different kind of cell structure compared to plants, animals, fungi, and even those quirky protists. Something about prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells.
You got a great memory. That distinction is key to understanding how bacteria fit into the grand scheme of life. Bacteria, along with another fascinating group called Archaea, are classified as prokaryotes. The defining feature of prokaryotic cells is their simplicity. They lack a true nucleus, which means their DNA floats freely within the cell instead of being neatly enclosed, like in our own cells. They also lack most of the complex organelles that we find in eukaryotic cells.
So prokaryotic cells are like the studio apartments of the cellular world, compact and efficient. Whereas eukaryotic cells are more like sprawling mansions with specialized rooms for everything.
That's a great analogy. And just like studio apartments might be more common in a bustling city, prokaryotic cells are the dominant form of life on Earth, at least in terms of sheer numbers and diversity. What's mind-blowing is that for billions of years, prokaryotes were the only life forms on our planet. They were the pioneers, shaping the early Earth's atmosphere and laying the groundwork for the evolution of all the complex life we see today.
Wow, it's humbling to think about these tiny organisms shaping the course of life as we know it. But if prokaryotes were so successful for so long, what led to the evolution of those more complex eukaryotic cells? It seems like nature went through a major renovation at some point.
That's a question that has fascinated scientists for decades. The leading theory is that eukaryotic cells evolved through a process called endosymbiosis, where one prokaryotic cell engulfed another, and instead of digesting it, they formed a symbiotic relationship. Over time, this partnership became so intertwined that they evolved into a single, more complex cell with specialized compartments, those organelles you mentioned earlier.
So the eukaryotic cells that make up all the plants, animals, fungi, and protists we see today are actually the result of ancient prokaryotes teaming up. That's incredible. It makes you wonder how many other secrets are hidden within our cells waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. The more we learn about the microscopic world, the more we realize how interconnected all life truly is. But speaking of interconnectedness, that brings us to the discovery of a very special group of bacteria, the extremophiles.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about those. They're like the adventurers of the bacterial world, thriving in places where most other life forms wouldn't stand a chance. Boiling hot springs, freezing glaciers, super salty lakes, you name it. There's probably an extremophile hanging out there.
Exactly. These extremophiles opened up a whole new chapter in our understanding of life's limits. Their existence challenged our preconceived notions of what constitutes a habitable environment. If they can thrive in such extreme conditions here on Earth, what does that tell us about the potential for life on other planets?
That's a fascinating question. It makes you realize that life might be far more resilient and adaptable than we previously thought. But how did these extremophiles change the way we classify life? Did their discovery lead to the creation of a whole new kingdom?
Not quite a new kingdom, but their discovery did play a major role in the development of the three-domain system, a level of classification above kingdoms.
Okay, I remember learning about domains, but it always seemed a bit confusing. Why add another layer of organization when we already have kingdoms?
It all boils down to those fundamental differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Remember how I mentioned another group called Archaea? Well, they were initially classified as bacteria because they also have prokaryotic cells, but as scientists delved deeper into their molecular and genetic makeup, they discovered something remarkable.
I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they find?
They found that despite their superficial similarities, archaea are actually as different from bacteria as they are from eukaryotes. It was a revolutionary discovery that shook the foundations of our understanding of the tree of life. It meant that the prokaryotes, which had long been lumped together, actually represented two distinct lineages, with vastly different evolutionary histories.
So even though bacteria and archaea look similar under a microscope, at a molecular level, they're like distant cousins who took very different paths in life.
That's a great way to put it. To reflect this newfound understanding, scientists proposed a new level of classification domains. The three domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya.
So all the kingdoms we talked about earlier, plants, animals, fungi, and protists, they all belong to the eukarya domain because they have eukaryotic cells, right?
That's right. And this three-domain system highlights the incredible diversity of life on Earth, emphasizing that some of the most profound differences aren't always visible to the naked eye.
It really makes you appreciate the power of molecular biology and genetics. By peering into the very building blocks of life, we're able to uncover relationships and patterns that we could never have imagined just by looking at organisms' outward appearances. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit fuzzy on the Protista kingdom. It seems like it's this giant melting pot of eukaryotic organisms that don't fit neatly into the other categories. Is that an accurate way to think about it?
You're not alone in feeling that way. Protista is indeed incredibly diverse, encompassing organisms that range from single-celled algae to giant kelp forests. And you're right, it often feels like a catch-all category for anything that doesn't fit neatly into the plant, animal, or fungi kingdoms.
But if it's so diverse, is Protista even a useful category anymore? What are the arguments for and against splitting it up?
That's a question that's currently being debated in the scientific community. Some scientists argue that Protista is too diverse and should be divided into multiple kingdoms to better reflect the evolutionary relationships between its members. They point out that some protists are more closely related to plants, animals, or fungi than they are to other protists.
So there are protists out there that are more closely related to us than they are to other protists.
That's amazing.
It really highlights how much we still have to learn about the intricacies of the tree of life. It's incredible to think about these microscopic organisms shaking up our understanding of life's big picture. But let's bring it back to us non-scientists for a second. Why should we care about how organisms are classified? I mean, it's fascinating, sure, but does it have any practical implications for our daily lives?
It absolutely does. Understanding biological classification is about so much more than just memorizing names and categories. It helps us make sense of the interconnectedness of all life on Earth and provides a framework for understanding how different organisms are related to each other, their evolutionary history, and their ecological roles. This knowledge is incredibly valuable in countless fields, from medicine and agriculture to conservation and biotechnology.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about creating a neat and tidy filing system for life. It's about understanding the very fabric of life on our planet and how it all fits together. Can you give us a specific example of how this knowledge impacts our lives in a tangible way?
Let's take the example of developing new antibiotics. To combat bacterial infections effectively, we need to understand which bacteria are causing the infection and what their specific vulnerabilities are. This knowledge is rooted in classification. By identifying the specific type of bacteria, we can target it with the most effective antibiotics, minimizing the risk of antibiotic resistance and improving treatment outcomes.
So knowing where an organism sits on the tree of life can actually help us develop life-saving treatments. That's pretty amazing.
Exactly. And it goes beyond medicine. In agriculture, understanding the relationships between plants and their pests helps us develop more effective and sustainable pest control strategies. In conservation, knowing the evolutionary history of endangered species helps us design more effective conservation plans. Classification is a fundamental tool for understanding and managing the biodiversity of our planet.
It sounds like classification is like having a map to navigate the complexity of life on Earth. It helps us understand where we came from, where we are, and where we might be going in terms of evolution and our relationship with the natural world.
I love that analogy. And just like any good map, our system of classification is constantly being updated and refined as we explore new territories and make new discoveries.
Speaking of new discoveries, I'm curious to know what you think the future holds for classification. What kind of discoveries might shake things up in the coming years? Are we going to discover organisms so strange that we'll need to create entirely new categories to classify them?
We're living in an age of unprecedented biological exploration. With advancements in technology, we're able to probe the microscopic world and the depths of our oceans like never before. We're constantly uncovering new species, and some of them are so unique that they challenge our existing classification systems.
I'm imagining some deep-sea creature that glows in the dark and has tentacles that shoot lasers. Okay, maybe not lasers, but you get the idea. What if we were to discover life on another planet? How would we even begin to classify it within the framework of Earth-based life?
That's a question that really gets to the heart of what life is and how we define it. It's a mind-boggling possibility that would force us to rethink our entire understanding of biology and evolution. Would extraterrestrial life fit into our existing domains and kingdoms, or would we need to create something entirely new? It's a question that scientists are already grappling with, even though we haven't found any alien life yet.
That's a thought-provoking question I'm going to be pondering for a while. It's a great reminder that science is an ongoing journey of exploration and discovery, and there's always more to learn. This deep dive has been an incredible journey through the world of biological classification. We've traveled from Aristotle's two kingdoms to the three domains of life, exploring the fascinating world of bacteria, archaea, and those eukaryotic misfits we call protists.
And we've seen how classification isn't just an academic exercise, it's a vital tool for understanding the interconnectedness of life, for advancing medicine, protecting our environment, and so much more.
It's been an eye-opening exploration of how we make sense of the incredible diversity of life on Earth. To all our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming. Until next time, happy class.